Relevant Magazine decided to spice up everyone's life and ask a very controversial question.
Very.
I've heard heated debate on this, and I've seen many memes. Lots of memes.
Oh, goodness. I haven't.
It's because you're not old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because your generation loves the idea, generally speaking.
Well, of course.
And Ron and
We
my
want debt.
generations hate the idea. Should Christians support student loan forgiveness? There's increasing pressure from the federal government because of the excessive amounts of student loan debt. Student loan debt somewhere in like the trillions at this moment. $1.75 trillion
Wow.
in student loan debt.
That's very upsetting.
Whether or not there should be efforts to relieve it. Now, in fairness, okay, I have to remind myself of this. I always talk about when my dad was a kid,
Yeah, Brian, you're not that old.
my dad played drums as a job
Yes.
and paid for the University of Minnesota tuition and graduated debt-free. Now, he lived at home.
Okay, so it wasn't paying room and board.
No, but he paid for his tuition by playing the drums in the 1970s, okay?
Yeah, I don't even think you could pay for a room and board doing that today.
I don't think you pay for a sandwich for most people playing drums. So I did look up some statistics to try to figure out, because a lot of the argument that happens is around young people these days are like, it's more expensive.
Right.
It's more
And
expensive.
it is way more expensive.
Now, I found two statistics for us. First one would be if you adjust for inflation,
Mm-hmm.
what would be the compared tuition costs, tuition, fees, room and board, total costs in 1980 and in 2020? If you adjust 1980 for inflation.
Okay. And I was in college in 1980.
So adjusted for
In today's
inflation.
dollars.
In today's dollars, adjusted for inflation, it would have cost you for tuition, room and board at a public university and fees in 1980, $10,231
A
total.
year.
I believe it's
Per
a
year.
semester.
Oh, uh-huh.
No, wrong. Year
Okay.
per year.
I was going to say, because then that'd be 20,000. But
So tuition, room, board, and fees adjusted for
So
inflation.
like 40 by the time you're done ish.
hmm
Okay.
In 2020, tuition, room, board, and fees at a public university, $28,775,
It's doubled.
that's a
Almost
lot
Double
more.
plus, yeah.
Almost
which is a
triple,
180% increase.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now you can say, but wages.
Okay,
Inflation.
sure.
Wages go up too, silly man.
They do.
So I don't have the exact same dates. Okay. But what I do have is income adjusted for inflation, median income in 1989 and 2016.
Okay.
So it's a significant period of time. So in today's dollars, the median income in 1989 would have been $54,042.
Okay.
The median income in 2016, $59,039.
So we're talking about tuition has tripled and wages has gone up for $4,000.
Specifically, 0.3% growth in wages between 1989 and 2016.
Mhm. And the college was 80 that we used, right?
Yes.
So
So there's a 180% increase from 1980 to 2020 in college tuition. And between 1989 and 2016, a 0.3% growth in wages. So asking someone to
Oof.
pay 10 grand for a year of college when they're making 54,000, that's not so bad. Asking someone to pay 28,000 when their salary is
Making
59, it's a big
Mhm.
difference
yes, it is.
as percentage of income.
It's half.
So, but this is the argument, right, from you young people?
I'm not arguing anything.
Because you don't want to get people mad at you.
That, and I haven't thought about it enough to see what I think about it.
So what young people would say is society should help do some loan forgiveness because it's so unfair how high college tuition has gotten compared to what all the rest of you had. It's not fair. It's out of control. You can't get
There's-
mad at us. We needed college education. You told us we needed one. And it was so much more affordable for you.
There's a point to be made there. Yeah.
But
Well, government funds are limited, and the memes I see bring up like you sign the documents to say, yes, I agree to this loan at this interest rate over this period of time, where people get sick with cancer or something. They never agreed to that. So government funds should be instead paying off medical bills. I see that one a lot.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, because I mean, my daughter, I did the math when we sat in orientation at University of Toledo last year, and I held up my calculator for her because I can't do basic math.
Mm-hmm.
And the total cost for 4 years, $104,000.
Mm-hmm.
She knew it was going to cost her over $20,000 a year, and she still signed the paperwork. / I did.
Mm-hmm.
So she knew what she was signing up for. So
Yeah.
old people say, quit your whining. You knew it was expensive. It's not my fault they increased the cost so much.
Yeah, but you don't really know. No. I mean, you know the numbers,
Yeah.
but you don't know how big that really is until you start paying it back and realize
And the interest on
this
it.
is not going down very fast.
Yeah, our generations, mine and Lawrence, we were told like, no, you have to go to
Yes,
college.
that's what I was about to say.
This is your only option. I mean, from the age of 12, we had college recruiters coming in, counselors saying, where are you going to college? What's your career path going to be? And it's going to be through college, right? And then you make your decision about where you want to go to school at like 17, 18. And then, I don't have strong feelings one way or the other, but there's argument that these loans are predatory because you sign them when you are so young. You don't understand economics. And there's argument for you kind of being groomed for this, and because no one told you that there were other options.
And yet you still know what you got into. And like Ron said, people have more than that in
I don't
medical
think you know
debt.
what you got into. I don't think so. I think that's what Daria's saying.
You don't
Well,
know
there-
anything when
well,
you're 17, 18.
Right, in terms of mental processing, but in terms of knowing dollar amounts and signing, it's clear.
It's not clear what interest rates are to a 17-year-old.
And a lot of them
Well-
have lofty expectations for how much money they're going to make on the other side, too.
In
True.
fairness, you can't even sign loan documents. I had to go through online classes. Now, I clicked through a lot of it, but they require you to understand this is what interest rates are. This is how much it's going to cost you in interest. Like, there's no question today about what it costs. There's
Yeah.
clarity.
I understand. I think what Daria is also saying is we were told for years and years and years there is no other option except college, and you're never going to get a job if you don't go to college.
Right.
There's nothing else for you. You have to go to college.
Which is a lie, by the way.
You have to have a
Exactly.
college on your resume, otherwise you're not going to get a job.
So you're saying you were lied to,
I think so.
and that's part of the cost of society when you
I think
lie to
so.
people.
And now we know these things, but I would argue that my generation to go to college, we were probably the start of starting to catch on to this, but this really hasn't blown up. We're like, oh, we are aware of what's going on, and people are now choosing not to go to college until probably a couple years ago.
Yeah, it's just starting.
But in fairness to Ron, I mean, medical debt for some people is worse than student loan debt, and they didn't sign up for that. Even healthy people who make good decisions. I'm not talking about somebody who's wasting their own life away with bonbons and, beer or something.
Cigarettes.
Yeah. Like that person, I mean, why wouldn't we forgive their debt too? And by the
And-
way, some people make really bad business decisions. They meant well,
Mm-hmm.
and they end up in debt.
Yeah.
Let's help them. Like, how do we pick who gets help? See what I mean? Like somebody might go, that's not fair that we forgive student loan debt in some measure because there's lots of other debt out there too. Why should they get it when I don't?
I agree with what Daria mentioned, predatory lending. I think the banks should bear a significant burden of this. And I would love to see, this is probably pie in the sky, but interest rates on student loans be tied to the federal interest rates giving to banks. And so, you still have your debt, but it's not accumulating at the speed it does now. And, you can afford better to pay it off. Maybe it's still too much, especially if you kept on adding to the debt by getting a master's and then pursuing postmaster's doctoral work or something. But, yeah, I think the banks should have known better than to give a lot of these loans. I think the schools were predatory in promising, the percentage of our students who get jobs and
Yeah.
well-paying jobs. Well, and using terms like well-paying, meaning, yeah, they get more than minimum wage.
Right.
That's not well-paying.
It's not going to pay off your $200,000, $300,000 loans.
Right.
Well, let's do this. Let's take a quick break here. This is WCRF Mornings with Brian. Relevant Magazine asked, should Christians support student loan forgiveness? We've talked about some of the basics. They go through some statements that are common oppositions to student loan forgiveness, and they give some answers. I'll skim through those, and we'll try to lean towards what might a Christian think of this, whether or not a person likes it. We're all believers. How should our faith impact our view on this? We're just tiptoeing towards a controversy.
I don't know if we're tiptoeing anymore.
We're all
We
in.
plunged in.
Cannonball. Relevant Magazine asked, should Christians support student loan forgiveness? If you're just tuning in, we've chatted about various arguments for that. We talked about how wages have barely gone up. Tuition has gone up astronomically. And young people were told, unless you go to college, you're going to be a total loser, even though that's not true. Now, Relevant Magazine goes through some oppositional statements to student loan forgiveness, and they give their answers. I want your reaction to them. One of them, how will this affect me or my family if this happens? We don't have any student loans. So their answer is, well, hey, the more student loans that are forgiven, the more people who can afford to like buy homes and be involved, therefore the more property taxes, the more they're contributing to society.
Mm-hmm.
So it actually benefits you when people's loans are forgiven because they can then purchase property and begin paying property tax, which benefits society.
Similar to how you pay property taxes for schools, even if you don't have children in those schools.
Mm-hmm. Another one, why should someone else's debt forgiveness come out of my taxes? This is a big argument.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have any debt. I shouldn't have to pay for your silly debt. The answer to that is, in their article at least, we already do a lot of things paying for other people's stuff out of your taxes, like Social Security, roads, public schools. Tons of your tax money goes to paying other people things for other people.
Schools and roads is not quite the same as someone else's education. Like public schools for our community and roads for our community is not quite the same as someone's personal education. I'm not sure that if that is like tracking for me.
Yeah, honestly, too, and I can say this because I went to school with some of them, a lot of people get really useless degrees. So I can totally understand why some people have hesitations.
Yeah, well, and because in that sense, universities are culpable.
Yeah.
Like they're allowing someone to get an art history degree. God
But they're
bless
not
art
going to get anything
historians.
with.
Right, and they
They
know
can't
it.
do anything.
They're going to spend hundreds of thousands at a private school on art history.
Yeah, museum curators' jobs are few and far between.
Right. It's that or a professor.
Yeah.
And those are few and far between.
Yes.
Because the lucky few who have an art history degree and get a job are not going to leave it.
Yes.
And you mentioned Social Security. We pay into that.
Right.
So it's like the government is a bank in that regards, holding our money until our retirement.
Now, the last one would be just the loan payback is just unaffordable.
Yeah, I saw this video of a woman sitting down to like pay her student loan bills, and she had been paying for 10 years or something like that. She had paid something like $120,000, and she hadn't even made a dent because of the interest rates.
Yeah, it's possible that someone could make they'd arrange to make a payment that's below the cost of interest.
Yeah.
And they end up actually accumulating more debt as they can't afford it.
So it was like $70,000, but she had already paid $120,000.
So like they say, for example, some people can be charged up to 20% of it, like it's income based, your repayment, up to 20% of your income.
Wow.
And so then they did the math on this. So they said an individual earning $60,000 a year with federal and private education loans must pay $1,000 a month in student loan repayment according to the income-based repayment plans. Income taxes are around 28%. Housing, in theory, should cost no more than 30% of your gross household income. And then, of course, if they're Christian, they're going to be tithing 10% because you want them to do that. After income taxes, student loan, housing, and their tithing, they should be left with 12% of their gross income, which is $600.
It doesn't even factor in
Groceries?
if they've got kids and need daycare.
Yeah.
It's also insanely expensive.
So again, for housing, tithing, income tax, student loans, they're left with $600 a month.
Yeah, I'm not sure that the answer is that we pay back, that we do student loan forgiveness. I don't know. Is the answer that the government has to crack down on universities doing this to people, charging this type of tuition for people?
I think we need to go to the root of the problem, because how this is going to work is if it's forgiven, then that just continues to inflation with tuition, and the whole problem starts again in 10 to 20 years. Personally, I can see arguments for both sides. I really don't care which side you line up on, but I would ask for a little bit of compassion.
Yeah.
We see this a lot from some older folks who just don't understand that objectively younger folks have been dealt a raw deal with the economy with stuff like this. I'm not asking you to pay for my mistakes. I have student debt, but I am asking that you be a little bit compassionate when we're complaining that things are hard.
Yeah.
Is there so that's a Christian response, right? Showing compassion and empathy towards somebody else,
Yeah,
not
you can
harsh judgment.
You can say, I don't think the government should be paying student loans, but you can have empathy and compassion on the data that you've just given.
Is there an argument to be made, though, where a Christian could support student loan forgiveness?
Sure. There sure can.
Mm-hmm.
Like what? Like generosity towards the poor, essentially?
Yeah, caring for those less fortunate.
What about a Christian argument for not forgiving student loan debt? Is there a Christian argument for that?
I think so.
There is. Like what?
For not forgiving?
Yeah.
I think it's just that being good stewards of your own money. Like people are also struggling that are older and have already gone through school, or they didn't choose to get loans, and they still need to provide for their families and their well-being and their churches and their ministries and their communities.
And there are consequences for actions.
Yeah.
The challenge becomes, right, like if you say, yeah, it was the universities, make them accountable, you still have at least one generation, maybe two generations of people who are crippled by student loan debt. It doesn't help them because the universities go, okay, yeah, sorry about that. Why is no one advocating that universities pay off student loan debt?
Or banks.
As opposed to taxpayers?
Yeah.
Like Harvard could do it.
Yeah.
We've talked about their endowment fund.
Harvard.
Just Harvard could probably pay all the student debts in the world.
All of it.
I think nobody's thought of a defendable plan to do that. You know, you'd have to have a plan that you could put forth. It would have to be sanctioned by the government to have teeth, and nobody's able to come up with a plan like that. I think a lot of universities are suffering now. We're hearing about a lot of the smaller ones closing because there are just not enough students anymore to go around. So they close up, and then the surplus of educators then theoretically should drive down the pay of educators.
Yeah.
So professors will be making a little bit less, which will bring down the cost.
Less professors, less people to pay.
Yeah, I just find it fascinating that there generally seems to be, people can't say that there isn't something unjust going on, right? There's some sort of injustice happening with mountains of debt young people have. Like it's not all their fault. I don't know anyone who says that, right? And yet we're only coming up with one solution: taxes. Like just the government fix it. Why is there no mass advocacy for like creative solutions, as in any university with an endowment must contribute 10% of their endowment towards student loan forgiveness?
What are they using that endowment for otherwise?
Nothing.
That's my question.
Nothing.
Well, I'm sure they do use it for something.
Harvard doesn't. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger.
Wow.
Most of them don't have to touch their endowments because even just the interest from the endowment is enough for them to use. That's millions, tens of millions of dollars.
And I think the co-conspirator, along with colleges, is the banks.
And so then the banks have to reduce.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, banks, you must reduce your interest rates to this percent. You're still going to make money, but you're no longer going to prey on people that you gave a bad loan to. Because trust me, it's easy to get a loan for student. I just did this for my daughter.
And interest rates are way too high. I mean, some of my student loan interest rates are more than my mortgage.
And I think they've made student loans, you can't default on them. They will attach them to your income tax or something. So they're guaranteeing they're getting their money.
Lots to think about on this one. We got some great text messages we're going to set aside and maybe bring this back up on Friday. Again, we don't have all the perfect answers here. We're just chewing on this because far too often what you see is just bombastic support on either side.
Right.
Hoping we can just listen a little bit. Not that there needs to be any solution right now, but it is a problem.
It is.
Whether we like it or not, there are millions of Americans crippled by student debt. And that does affect all of us in some way, and our churches. I mean, somebody else made the point in here too. It's like, well, hey, you're not getting the tithes you want.
Well, true.
You're also presuming they would tithe if their loans were forgiven. Lots to think about.